The Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions will come to order. Chronic pain is a significant public health challenge that has yet to receive adequate attention, given the tremendous impact it has on people all across our nation. It's estimated that approximately 116 million adults in America, more than the number of adults affected by heart disease, cancer, and diabetes combined, suffer from some form of chronic pain. These often debilitating conditions have a tremendous impact on many daily activities, making it difficult for many individuals with chronic pain to even meet their own basic needs. Chronic pain profoundly affects quality of life. It remains one of the most challenging conditions to assess and effectively treat. I repeat that. It remains one of the most challenging conditions to assess and effectively treat, even though it's one of the top reasons for doctors' visits. Because of the pervasive impact of chronic pain, we have convened this important hearing today to explore the current state of research, care, and education with respect to chronic pain. As the chair, not only of this committee, but of the Labor, Health, Human Services Appropriations Subcommittee, I have long encouraged a more ambitious emphasis on pain research at the National Institutes of Health. In 2003, NIH took a huge step forward in this area by creating the NIH Pain Consortium. And despite advances made by the NIH Pain Consortium, more still needs to be done at NIH and across federal government to address the unanswered questions surrounding diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of chronic pain. Today's hearing will largely focus, not exclusively, but largely focus on the recently released report by the Institute of Medicine titled Relieving Pain in America, a blueprint for transforming prevention, care, education, and research. The report advocates for enlightening healthcare providers, patients, and the public on the substantial burdens of living with chronic pain. And it highlights areas for improvement in pain research, care, and education. Education. We need to do a better job of educating in medical schools and in our residencies about the different forms of pain and how they should be treated. The so-called physiological pain that everyone recognizes right away, from a sprained ankle, a burn, a broken arm, cancer, where we know the physiological source of that pain. But then how about the physiological pain for which we don't know the source? Irritable bowel syndromes, spastic colons, fibromyalgia, back pain, and so many others, where there does not seem to be any underlying physical trauma, but we don't know the source. How do we educate? How do we educate our doctors to understand this and to make the, as I say, the right type of assessment and diagnosis? So I look forward to the testimony of our expert witnesses who approach the issue of chronic pain from a variety of perspectives, all with the goal of addressing this critical but often neglected public health issue. Dr. Pizzo, you ever read any of Dr. Sarno's books? The Mind Over Back Pain, 1984, Healing Back Pain, 1991, Mind Body Prescription, 1998, or The Divided Mind, 2006?
No, I have not read
That's
that.
okay. Dr. Maxter, you ever read any of his books?
I have not, but I'm very familiar with James Lang and Cannon's theories, which I think are elaborated, quite well in the books, is what I would guess.
Ms. Veasley, have you ever read? Okay. Have you read your books, Dr. Sarno? No. Here's why I asked that question. You can't read everything. And now Ms. Veasley told her story. I'm going to tell you my story and why Dr. Sarno is sitting there and why, as chairman, I had him here. Mm-hmm. I've always been healthy. Jet pilot in the Navy, physically active all my life, took pride in my physical health. 1988, I had an episode with my back, extremely painful. I was walking down the hallway right out here in the Dirksen building, and my pain hit my back so hard I fell right on my butt, right out here. It's kind of embarrassing, you know. I didn't know what was happening to me. It got a little bit better, but at one point, and I was working, and then the next year I was working on the Americans with Disabilities Act, of all things, And I couldn't even walk back and forth. I had to put a cot over in the Capitol for me to lay on. Shortly after that, I had an MRI. They looked at the MRI and said, well, you've got a bulging disc causing you some problems. You should take an anti-inflammatory. So I did. Pain went away. About 3 years after that, this is in the mid-90s, again, I got back pain so bad. I was in Los Angeles. I was in a hotel room. I had to go to the bathroom. I had to crawl to get to the bathroom. I came back here, had another MRI. Well, still have a bulging disc, but there's this little hole down there where all your nerves go through. That's my layman's term of putting it. And that thing's not so, maybe you need to have that thing opened up or something like that. And, well, I thought about that for a while, and I dismissed it because my back pain went away. You know, after a while, it went away. But every time it would come, I could barely sit, I could barely stand, I could barely move. Painful. And then in 2004, I had another episode. And it was really bad. And I remember I was at the National Convention up in Boston. I could barely move. In fact, I couldn't. I curtailed my activities there. I came back. That was my third MRI. I sent them up to the hospital for special surgery in New York to have them looked at. I wanted to get another opinion. Well, yeah, I probably needed steroid shots, and I needed to have that hole opened up, whatever that was. I had breakfast one morning with Mr. Ira Brind. He's the former chair of the university, Thomas Jefferson University Hospital in Philadelphia, just a friend of mine. And I told him I wasn't looking forward to this, but I'd checked with the doctors here, and they said I probably needed to have back surgery. In fact, one of the doctors had told me they had had back surgery, and they were fine. I really wasn't looking forward to that. So I told Ira, I said, yeah, well, I guess I'm going to have this back surgery, but it's been going on for all these years. He said, don't do it. He said, don't do this until I'm going to send you something. I'm going to send you a CD and I'm going to send you a book, and read those first before you take any action. And it was a CD and a book by Dr. Sarno, Healing Back Pain. Well, I read this through and I thought, that sounds like me. That really sounds like me. And so I began to follow his regimen. That was in 2004. I haven't had a back pain since. I've never had any surgery. I've never had steroid shots or anything like that. I haven't had any back pain since. Now, that's not quite true. Every once in a while, I do get a little tinge of back pain, but I know what's causing it. I have the knowledge that I know what's causing it. Now, I'm going to expose myself here to this audience, whoever else is watching. Now, sometimes when I tell people this, they think I'm nuts. They say, well, what do you do? And I said, it's very easy. I talk to my back. And what I say is basically, I don't have cancer. I don't have anything wrong with my spine. I don't have any injuries. So therefore, it's coming from stress. Somehow I'm being stressed out. And my spinal nerves and stuff are being deprived of oxygen. And that's what's causing it. So what I need to do is ignore that. And I need to go about my daily activities just as though I was completely well. And when I do that, it goes away. I don't know that the IOM is looking at this. Now, you might say, well, that's just you. This was a survey that was put in the book in 1999. And again, this is a small cohort. They had 104 patients on whom data was collected. The following year, they reached 85 of the group to determine the outcome. There were 39 males and 52 females in the group. And they were interested in the outcome. The categories for level of pain were as follows. 37 patients reported they now had little or no pain. 22 patients reported they were now 80 to 100% improved. 13 patients reported they were 40 to 80% improved. 13 patients reported no change to 40% improvement. 46 patients reported they were now unrestricted physically. These figures are extraordinary when one considers that the treatment of this physical disorder is educational. augmented in some cases by analytically oriented psychotherapy. 70% of this group had good relief from pain, and 75% were restored to normal or near normal physical function. So I wonder why we're not looking at things like this. Now, I have one more story. I have a near relative of mine, a close relative of mine. She was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. Terrible pain. She's a young woman. And so, because of my connections and things with NIH and stuff, I found some of the best doctors to talk to her about her fibromyalgia. They did. And she lives up in Pennsylvania, and so I would talk to her every so often, ask her how she's getting along, and nothing was getting better. She had withdrawn from her family, withdrawn from everything. I don't want to go into this in too much depth. Last year, I checked up on her. I wanted to check up on her, see how she was doing. She said, I think I've cured my fibromyalgia. I said, really? Was it that last doctor I set you up with? She said, no, a friend of mine gave me this DVD and a book by this Dr. Sarno in New York. Now, I had never mentioned his name to her. I hadn't thought about him in that context. And she now is, I wouldn't say totally pain-free, but she's over her fibromyalgia. And so when I see two things like this, one personal with me, my own self, and another with a close relative, I wonder why isn't this being looked at? Dr. Pisa, why isn't this being, that was my big, now